Good afternoon or good morning to those of you that have joined the webcast. Welcome. I'm Helen Beal. I'm a DevOpsologist at Ranger 4. And today I'm going to spend around half an hour exploring value stream management. Fairly new concept. Maybe some of you heard of it, maybe you haven't. We're going to do kind of three broad things today. We're going to have a start by talking about ways of working and the kind of outcomes that we're looking for, and then set the scene by looking at value stream mapping first of all, and then how that links to value stream management. So let's start with the ways of working. The whole world right now is changing. We're essentially moving from a waterfall way of working to an agile way of working, and we're in quite an interesting space. So on the left here, we have some research from the World Economic Forum who talk about us being in the fourth industrial evolution or revolution, typified by the merging of the physical, digital and biological worlds. So, maybe not chips in our brains, but, certainly smart appliances in our houses and smart devices on our bodies, collecting data about who we are and what we're doing on a minute-to-minute basis. Another slightly different view from Carlotta Perez, who talks about her techno-economic surges. So she talks about seeing these revolutions happening over again, these repetitive invention and wealth cycles. So you can see here that we have the eruption, then the frenzy. We have this financial bubble and things are polarized, and then we hit synergy in the golden age, and then we have maturity and market saturation, and then it starts all over again. So according to Carlotta's research, we're actually in the fifth industrial revolution, this one over here. So the preceding one's the industrial, age of steam and railways, age of steel and engineering, age of oil and automobiles. And we're now in this ICT revolution, which started in 1971, according to her research. And where we are right away with that is that we are here. So we are, according to Carlotta's research, at the turning point. So we've had a frenzy, we've had the dot-com bubble, we've had that burst, so we've had one recession, we've had a frenzy around casino finance and financing of things like mortgages, so we've had the credit crunch. So we've actually seen two recessions on this techno-economic surge, which is different from the previous ones, which only saw one. Some people think we might see a third. I'm potentially going to say that I don't think we will, but I'm not an economist. I am just an optimist. But whichever way we look at it, the research shows we're at the precipice here of another golden age. So we're about to go into 2020. Lots of people are drawing parallels with the Roaring Twenties. So we should all feel pretty excited about this, but there's still quite a lot of work to be done. So as I said, this ICT revolution, which is now really being led by the digital economy, and we're all being digitally disrupted, and we all need to think of our organisations as technology organisations. So many insurance companies that we work with, like Hiscox, talk about being a technology company. We have examples from retailers like Target in the US that have stood up for many years to describe themselves as a technology company. We have an increasing amount of banks like ING, who really put IT at the heart of what the bank is doing as a strategic enabler. We have airlines like Alaska Air that describe themselves as a technology company with wings. And my personal favourite is Domino's Pizza, who also see themselves as a technology company. And what this means is that technology is up front and centre in terms of what we're doing to delight our customers. It means that we are trying to establish a place where we are helping people and our customers be delighted with what we do. So the kind of things that we're trying to do when we move from waterfall to agile is we're trying to create all of these things here on the left. So on the right, we've got ways of working, and I think it's worth noting that there are a lot of different terms out there. So I've used agile quite a few times already. We could be saying DevOps, we could be talking about things like lean, we could be talking about holacracy or site reliability engineering, chaos engineering, safety cultures, learning organizations. There's a huge amount of systems of thought, a whole bucket of things that all have a lot of parallels. So they all seek to break change down into smaller bits and make it incremental so that we get these fast feedback loops. We want these small teams, so we want to get away from these very large processes, batch processes, large teams doing things. We want the people within them to be cross-functional so that we can accelerate the flow through our process and the flow of our value to our customers. We want to think product-centric, and we want those products to be long-lived, so we don't want these short-termist views about projects. We don't want to think about goals within the next few months. We want to set that long-term vision and then do very short experiments towards it. We are also seeing across the whole globe a flattening of hierarchies as people seek to distribute authority. This makes a lot of sense. What we're doing is we're putting power into the hands of the people that know the customer best, that know the work the best. We're making the most of this huge amount of talent that organisations have acquired over the years. We want this end-to-end value stream thinking, so we want to break dependencies and remove impediments that are interrupting the flow around that, and we really want this focus on the customer. We want to go faster, but we don't want to have any compromises in terms of quality. And underpinning all of this is the desire to improve everybody's well-being, so improve our working practices, make us more sustainable, and help everyone achieve autonomy, mastery and purpose in their working lives. So let's explore value stream mapping in a little bit more detail. So underpinning all of this, this is from the State of DevOps report this year, out a couple of months ago from the Accelerate team at Google Cloud Platform, GCP. And what they have established over many years of work and research is that performers, the higher performers in the world, so these organisations that perform better are doing these sort of things. They are deploying code more frequently. Their lead time from committing code to deploying that code is much faster. They're able to recover from incidents hugely quicker, and their change fail rate is a lot slower. So organisations are looking at this data and trying to figure out and asking us what they can do to make their organisations high performing and how they can harness these practices, and we can call them DevOps practices or principles or ways of working, to make their organisation more sustainable and more survivable in this disrupted economy. So let's just drill down on the metrics around cycle time for a moment there. We just talked about, we just saw there the lead time from commit to deploy figures. The lead time here, we're talking about the total elapsed time from the point where a user story enters the backlog now to the time it's completed, including the time spent waiting in the backlog. And then we have cycle time here as the time it takes from story to go from being in progress to done. So metrics is a really huge subject, really touching on it today. And one of the important things, not just around metrics actually, but all of these ways of working, is ensuring that you as an organisation really understand what it is that you mean when you say something. When somebody says continuous integration, what do they mean? Do they mean all developers committing code at least daily to trunk and performing a unit test, an integration test and a user acceptance test, and the build being automated? What is it that we mean when we say cycle time? So another definition of cycle time is the time elapsed from when an idea is first recorded in a value stream to when the idea is available to the customer, including waiting time, and the value can be realised. That's my own definition in the value stream mapping context, so more of a lean context. The definition there from Accelerate. Accelerate, by the way, is a great read. It's the book behind the data science of the State of DevOps report that we were just looking at. But they do use the term user story there. And as I've said, the whole world is in transition at the moment from waterfall to agile, and it's not something that happens overnight. Many organisations, most organisations, even all organisations, go through a period of time where teams are performing something that people describe as Wagile or water scrumful, where it is essentially a mixture of the old traditional project-based way of working and moving towards a sprint-based way of working. So whilst it would be lovely to think that everybody starts an idea when the user story enters the backlog, in many organisations we're not quite there yet, and we're still producing Word documents around system specifications and other specifications that maybe were in SharePoint and now in Confluence, but we're still not breaking them down and really starting at the user story as our conversation placeholder. So using my cycle time, let's have a closer look at value streams then. So I define a value stream as anything that delivers a product or a service. So some organisations will arrange around value streams, but actually what they're really doing is renaming business departments' value streams. And within them, what we'll see is lots of other value streams and products and services within there. So many pieces. But this is an example of a real value stream map that you can see here from one of our customers. If you think of a value stream map as a very high level view down on how a number of processes fit together, what you can see here is the number of processes that are hanging together here to allow these people to put an enhancement through their system. And you can see there are many, many steps. So this is a very human oriented activity. It's really very powerful. We really advise that anybody starting on any kind of ways of working improvement do this. It gets a bunch of people in the room together that have often not been in a room together before. And it helps them visually collaborate using some old school tools, paper and post-it notes, visually collaborate and discuss on what processes hang this thing together. And it helps them, what you can see here, these little wiggles, what we're doing here is analysing the amount of touch time, so the amount of elapsed time that activity actually happens in that process, and then down here, the amount of wait time. So between these two processes, typically how long are we waiting for things to happen. As I said, it gets the people in a room together having conversations they often haven't had before. And when we're very siloed, people do live in their own bubbles, and we get into the situation often when people's definition of done could be, I did my job. Whereas actually where we want to go is this end-to-end life cycle thinking, as we touched on earlier. What we want is everybody to understand that the definition of done is the customer over here has received value. What you're seeing here in the lower level, by the way, is a future state map. So typically when we do value stream mapping, we'll spend 2 days on it. On the first day, we'll build our current state map, analyze it all, get all the data out. And the second day, what we'll normally do is actually just kind of rip it up, if you like, or just start again. So we won't try and make point improvements across this map. We'll reimagine it from the ground up. So that's great, looks really pretty. Here's an example of what it might look like if you represented it on a screen like this, rather than just seeing the real work with the post-it notes. So you can see here again, we've got these different steps, we've got these multiple handoffs. You can see here we've got work time and wait time. People do use different terminology and language. So here we've got lead time, we tend to have cycle time. So you can see how much waste you're getting in there, and you can see notes have started to be made about some of the problems that they're having. So we have the ability to automate some of these calculations as well, and because you know, this one I just showed you is relatively simple, you can imagine here with this one that actually doing the mental arithmetic, just not even just summing these, is quite a big task, and can be quite time consuming. And what we often allow people to do is to have minimum to maximum values in here as well, which makes that arithmetic even more complex. So we have automated calculators that help us do that. And then what we've been able to do as well is use those calculators to actually assign monetary cost to these processes. There's a really big caveat with this in the DevOps world, in that as I described before, we are becoming technology companies. So technology and the way that we deliver value via technology to our customers is a huge competitive differentiator. So we don't want to be thinking of our technology teams as cost centers. We don't want to be measuring things like productivity. What we do want to say is how much additional capacity we can inject when we make these improvements. So in this particular example here, you can see the current product value stream was a maximum cost of 3 million for an enhancement, and in the future we're getting it down to about 95,000. Similarly, what you're seeing here is the current enhancement here was 271,000 euros, and then the minimum for current was 64. The future is a bit lower. You might think that's not much lower, and it's basically to do with the amount of time that something sits in the backlog. that we need to address. But you can still see that there is a significant, if you think of it as a percentage and how much more value you're going to be able to create for your customers, that's great. But the real killer one is here, the 271 to 66. So we can start to interpret these things, and we can see things like we can get a 66% reduction in the minimum cycle time for a product, which is not unusual. We can learn that it can take us 27 days to receive value for a minor product change. 37% reduction in the minimum cycle time for an enhancement, and 12 days to receive value from that enhancement. So there's some very strong stories that we get out of these value stream mapping exercises. What we're really trying to answer here is ultimately, what does the customer want, and how can we get it to them as quickly as possible, and how can we make ourselves predictable? So one of the things that some of our clients get a little confused with really is the relationship between customer journey maps and value stream maps. This is a customer journey map. Then they're quite different. Hopefully, by showing you the value stream map earlier, this has become clear. In the value stream map, we're looking at our internal, in this case, software delivery process of delivering value. In a customer journey map, we're just looking at how the customer steps through the product, what their experience is, and how we get them to the place that we would like them to be, and how we make sure they are delighted and not upset. So how does this connect, this value stream mapping, how does this connect to value stream management? Well, there's a few challenges around value stream mapping. One is that it's very human-based, so we have to get these people in a room. We produce a number of deliverables, so we produce the current state map and the future state map, the calculators that we've seen. We produce a hypothesis backlog, so a list of items and user stories that people can take away and add to their backlog and start working through to make the improvements. And that's all very well and good, but it gets difficult then because people aren't great at getting back in the room and regularly going back and reassessing what their map looks like now and what improvements have been made. And it's very manual and human oriented, so they have to kind of get back in the room together and do the process again. So one of the things we do, as well as helping people by actually doing the value stream mapping or facilitating the value stream mapping exercise with them, what we also do is we train them to do value stream mapping themselves. And this we find helps people with their ongoing improvements. So Peter Drucker said this: if you can't measure it, you can't improve this. I use this a lot when I'm training people and talking to people about this stuff, and I kind of challenge this because I think you can improve things. The challenge is really, if you aren't measuring it, how can you know that you've improved it? How can you prove that? We talk a lot in DevOps about culture, and the fundamental foundational stone of a good culture in the DevOps world is one of trust. The way that we build trust is by providing evidence. And evidence is about data-driven opinion, not kind of human-driven opinion. So we need these measurements to provide the data to be the evidence that helps us build trust, that helps us earn trust and earn the right to do different things. So what we do when we're doing DevOps evolution, I just talked about a cultural aspect, but let's talk about automation for a second. What we're trying to do is create this loop. So in the old days, we used to draw a software delivery lifecycle in SDLC in a very linear way, and we'd go from one end to the other and then start again. Because we are wanting to accelerate, we talk more about this continuous release life cycle. So in Range 4 terminology, we call it the DevOps loop, our DevOps tool chain. So it starts with ideas where our product requirements are collected and refined, and then we go into the integration phase where product is composed and integrated. And some of this validation happens in the CI/CD pipeline, but we need to test the product both functionally and non-functionally. And when it's ready, it goes to live and it is used by our customers, where we can start collecting the value-based feedback, where we can start using that. So, typical DevOps toolchain can start looking really complex. This is just an example one, and I've seen many more with many more pieces to them, but just to kind of talk you through the pieces we've got here, we've got Jira and Confluence here. So we've got Jira as our product backlog, we've got Confluence as our wiki and collaborative area, and we've got Slack here for chat ops and for general collaboration. We have an artifact repository here. In this case, it's Nexus from Sonotype, and we've got GitLab as our source control. We've got SoniCube helping us do code review. We've got our builds being automated in our CI/CD engine and Jenkins. We've got various different types of tests here. So we've got Cucumber driving behavior-driven development, BDD. We've got things like, I haven't put a unit test on here actually, but we've got Jasmine doing integration tests and Selenium doing some user acceptance tests, and Jamie to doing performance tests. And then we are then going into live. So we've got a ServiceNow here as our service desk, and then we've got Splunk doing some logging, and Dynatrace doing some additional analysis that can both be fast fault diagnosis for the support desk, but it could also be potentially doing things like measuring the business value flow. And in fact, in the past, this is where we've really looked to tools like Dynatrace and application performance management tooling to give us insights into the customer journeys and insights into what value is being realized. But it's really just looking at this final part. So we still end up with this question really about what's happening here. What's the value? How do we measure the value for this customer? Is it in pounds and dollars? Are we measuring by usage? Are we measuring by sentiment? But we still have a kind of a big gap here. So we've got some choices that we can make when we build our DevOps tool chains. And typically what happens is a development team will build a bit of it. They'll build a bit of build automation. They'll build a little bit of perhaps some test automation. They will start maybe extending that. So I gave a definition of continuous integration earlier on, where we had all developers committing code at least daily to trunk and running a unit test, an integration test, and a user acceptance test. Most clients that I work with are mainly just doing unit tests at the moment. Doing the integration tests and the automated UAT is coming, but it's coming a little bit later. So once we've built something that looks like what we saw before, so all of these pieces now, what we really want to do is being able to trace the journey of our value through this. So we need to start integrating our tools so that we can have this traceability. So you've got choices, like first choice, you might decide to build your own integrations. Now this is time consuming. And if you do this, you're going to tend to create some tightly coupled integrations, and your requirements for your tool chain are likely to evolve over time. So if you do that, you might be getting yourself into a position where you make it more difficult to swap things in and out later. Lots of the tools come with pre-built connectors. So Jira and ServiceNow, for example, have existing connectors. So that's quicker, but does it really help if you want to swap things out? There are integration brokers out there as well that you can use. So that helps, and you can swap things out more easily. But do you have better visibility across the teams? And remember, we're trying to create trust culturally. So we want to be able to see what's going on. We want to have these metrics available to people. You could use some dashboards. So you could use something like Hygeia from Capital One. You could use the dashboards available in tools like Zebia Labs' Excel Deploy or Electric Clouds tooling. So these are really good at making data visible and creating or driving transparency in an organisation and helping with that cultural change we want and those behaviours that we want to see. But the screen scraping, which is effectively what a dashboard is, it doesn't give you these end-to-end insights, cycle time. So this is where we look to this category of tooling, value stream management. What this gives us is the end-to-end integration, and it allows us to swap bits and pieces in and out when we want to. It measures that cycle time that we learned about when we did value stream mapping, and it provides insights for improvements. So this is now sounding really good, because what we are now able to do is say, right, we've created a value stream map, a current one and a future one. So we know where we are and we know where we want to be going. But that was quite human-driven opinion, and we're really bad at going back and checking it. But if we implement a tool now that supports what we've identified through the discussions and conversations we've had, and we can now measure that cycle time, it will then start highlighting those waste areas for us. So as we create interventions, for example, if security are taking or creating a 6-week delay in a process while we wait for a response for them, doing something with the security team to help them manage the constraints that they're experiencing, help them teach our teams to know more about the kind of answers that they're seeking, providing automation tools that automate some of the security checks. All of that kind of stuff, we can see the improvements. So value stream management is a new tool category that was uncovered through some research by Forrester towards the end of last year, 2018. So they define value stream management as a combination of people, process and technology that maps, optimizes, visualizes and governs business value flow through heterogeneous enterprise software delivery pipelines. So these slides are available on the slideshow, and we'll send a link out later, and you can find a link to the reports here, but this is the summary of the report. So you can see we don't actually have any leaders at the moment. We've got people like Plutora with a pretty strong strategy and a strong current offering, and some people kind of coming up the back like Electric Cloud and Cloudbeast. But what Forrester is saying is that value stream management is an emerging tool category that connects an organization's business to its software delivery capability. VSM tools provide multiple roles: product managers, developers, QA and release managers, a view into planning, health, indicators and analytics, helping them to collaborate more effectively to reduce waste and focus on work that delivers value to the customer and the business. So really anybody can start looking at things like cycle time. That's going to be really useful for them. Applying the concepts of value stream and lean to software development is not new, but having a single software tool that facilitates VSM is. So as we saw, what this is doing is connecting our tool chain together and analysing it for us. Here's a slightly different view on the kind of things that it's doing. We've got our enterprise agile planning management and idea management. We've got release planning. And whilst we know that in our ideal ways of working, we've got teams autonomously releasing, most organisations are in a position at the moment where they do a huge amount of release coordination due to dependencies that they've got in very complex systems. So we have things like release scheduling and calendars and release weekends and all of those kind of things. So we need something that can step us through the different stages of our evolution. So another example here is around test environment management. Again, if a team were dedicated autonomously to a long-lived product and had cloud, they could just spin up test environments as and when they needed them, no worries. But the reality for many enterprises is that they have multiple teams sharing product that are sharing things like the test environments, and they have to book test environments and be able to perform their testing. So whilst we know the direction we're going in, the reality is that we are often starting somewhere different, and our path is not as easy as switching one thing off and switching another thing on. So our dashboards start looking more interesting, and we can do other things like look at release health and start getting artificial intelligence to give us advice on whether a release is likely to be successful or not. So we can start making data and our cycle time available real time, so we can inspect it constantly, rather than if we do value stream mapping, having to get a bunch of humans in a room for a significant amount of time regularly, which people generally find really hard to do. We can now as teams start using our value stream management data to inform us more regularly about how our improvements are going. So to summarise then, in value stream, mapping is very human-centric. It's around storytelling and narrative, whereas value stream management is more tool-centric. It's about science and insights. So it's a difference between being opinion-driven, so qualitative, and data-driven, so more quantitative. Value stream mapping is about humans visually collaborating, and value stream management is more about having visibility into our cycles and continuous inspection of them. We're not using walls and post-it notes now, we're using dashboards and artificial intelligence. Value stream mapping is incredibly powerful to build that initial business case about why we want to commit more time and resource and energy in this area. Whereas value stream management helps us to optimize much more incrementally. Value stream mapping really highlights our waste, and value stream management does do that, but it also automates a lot of our compliance. So it allows us to be more auditable, in fact, to even avoid having to do things like manual audits, because we can literally point the auditors at our systems. So that's the end of the introduction to value stream management that I wanted to do today. We're obviously very happy to do a deeper dive with any of you at any point if that's something you'd like. I think there's a few questions coming up. Hopefully you can still see that screen. I wanted to wish you all a Merry Christmas, because probably won't do another webcast between here and there, so I've put lots of snowflakes on there. So let's have a look at these questions. Where would you suggest starting to move a fairly traditional organisation to move to value stream or product structure? So what we typically see in terms of organisational design as people evolved these other ways of working is that people will try a pilot, probably in just one or two or a handful of teams, depending on the company size. It could be that the leadership have decided that pilot could happen, or it could be very grassroots that a team have decided that they need to do this and they just get on and do it. What tends to happen is they'll start building these autonomous teams, typically 5 or 10 people, typically initially developers and testers in a room. Maybe they'll add some business analysts. Later will come people like IT operations people and security people. And then as that model is starting to prove, they want to use that as a pattern and increase it. And what often drives this is then a bigger decision about often creating a digital department. And that's normally sort of maybe 10 or 15% of an organisation. And when that goes well, they want to extend the model more. There's usually a point where an organisation hits a kind of critical mass where they decide that the whole organisation needs to come with them. And what happens at this point is very disruptive. It's a big bang transformation, but it often has to happen, because if it doesn't happen, what we've got is a situation where we've got a number of people that are upset, that there are the cool kids that are getting to do the cool new stuff in their new funky offices, and they're not being allowed to play, and they have to follow all the old rules. So usually there is a wholesale moment where this organisational design happens. So the next question, what is the most common thread we see across all organisations you meet? So all clients are moving from waterfall to agile. They're all doing that because things are painful and they want to be able to deliver value faster. I often say that organisations look a lot like fingerprints to me. We assess a lot of organisational capability and they all look fairly similar. So we do see common patterns, like I've mentioned a few things like shared test environments. Production like test environments is a huge problem for a lot of organisations. DevSecOps is a key chat we have with almost everybody, because security almost always is late to these type of conversations. We see problems getting the right sort of person in a product owner role and really understanding how that role works. So there are a lot of patterns. Every organisation is slightly unique, but like a fingerprint, we see commonalities. Another question, we seem to have got some of the DevOps practices in, but there is still a constraint that the organisation wants us to keep the final tests and checks. How to persuade them to trust us? What tools could help with this? So I'm not 100% sure what this question is asking. I think it's saying that there's an organisation is still wanting things like a CAB or a release checklist. So it's saying, yeah, I know the team thinks they've done what they needed to do, but actually I want my central team to check that they have done what they said they were going to do. So this requires collaboration between the teams and those central teams to talk about what it is they're checking for. So just quickly, one way of resolving these kind of things is automating these kind of things into a workflow in Jira. So for example, you would not allow a build to go green, so it would not be available to push to live if a peer review had not been done by people in the team. So are we saying that this creates the value my CIO will want to see, and will we be able to prove it? So yes, the value stream map essentially creates that first part of your business case. So you've got your current case and your current map and your future map, and the delta between those forms the business case that your CIO, CEO, CFO will want to see. Why it's going to create more value for your customers and make you a high-performing organisation. What value stream management does is then support that by producing the data that proves what you've said was possible in your human-driven value stream mapping activity is now in existence, and it actually shows how you're making improvements over time and starts reporting back on the value that your customers are receiving. So that was the last question. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining us today. I hope you've enjoyed it, and thank you very much for your participation, and Merry Christmas.